It's Thursday night, which means it must be Not Playing Politics with Alexander Keaton and Nick Bradshaw. How are you doing today, Nick?
I'm doing well. Trying this new format out here. Gonna see how we can perform for our fans on a Thursday evening as opposed to a Saturday morning.
Yep, little shorter, but definitely weekly instead of bi-weekly. I think this will be much better. That way we can say more with it. Let's face it, the world's a very quickly moving entity. There's no reason to do it meet up every 2 weeks. There's a lot to talk about. But Nick, first of all, we have some new viewers who are posting our comments. You want to say hi to the good people?
I do. I want to say hi to everybody that's out there, everybody who's listening, some of our fans who started with us what feels like 1,000 years ago with COVID, but a special thanks out to everyone for listening, for joining in and for being a part of it. Many of our listeners who have become fans or contributors to the show. I want to thank them. What we're doing tonight is trying out something that, for those of you who remember the Garfield episodes as children, it's called Garfield and Friends, and they used to have the subplot episodes of this farm where all the animals would live. They used to use quick little episodic series or sequences that they would just do a scene or two, kind of like a vignette. Kind of like Pulp Fiction without all the violence, and they were called quickies. And so I thought that was kind of a neat context to put this in. So instead of the hour-plus long show, the long form every 2 weeks, we're going to take the show in a new direction, and we're going to try it out for half an hour on Thursday nights and see what we can get out of it. But we're excited. We certainly have a lot to get to. And Alex, I'll tell you, I think you're spot on. There's just too much to get to in 2 weeks. So much changes that what we plan to talk about is already either inadequately covered or out of the news. So I'm looking forward to seeing what this will do for us and our listeners.
No, absolutely. So do follow, like, and subscribe, and do feel free to share this video and inflict this channel upon all of your other friends and enemies alike. But to kick off this week, I have a couple of quick observations, and I'm going to leap into my question, if I may. Obviously, I think the big news of the week was the signing of these new normalization peace accords between Israel and the UAE, and that Oman is not Oman. I just forgot the other nation is signing on. Anyway, but they said that this normalization treaty is actually going to ultimately it probably include the Saudis and a few others, including Morocco. And this is really seeming to be, sort of this movement of peace that's sort of taking over the Middle East. We also have the fact that Trump was able to get, Sarajevo in that conflict there's been going on for so very, very long to the table. He's ended North Korea, and yet the news media can't seem to do anything but downplay all of these events and really say things like, well, it's not really peace accords because Israel wasn't really at war with the UAE. What does that sound like to you in your head? I mean, it doesn't sound like they're going out of their way to try and pretend that this isn't as significant as it is.
Well, I think a theme that you're seeing present in the news, or I should say in more of the independent sides of media, is that the standard operating procedures for objective news journalism are effectively over. I don't like to use the term that they're dead. That sounds not only pejorative, but it also brings about a very terminal outlook. I don't see that they're dead. I see that they're simply they're done with. They are trying and have been trying with the engagement and the infusing of social media into all of this. And this has taken place over decades, but this is where we are. And I think place thematically when they started to use metrics such as likes or views or as we do with this show, hey, click the subscribe button, hit the notifications, and when you start to use that as a metric and then you monetized it, what's going to bring anybody to your channel? You don't have the 3 big news networks sitting there at night. You now have 3 million news networks. So what's bringing you to those pages? With that approach to the dissemination of news, I think what we've done is we've created the standardization of op-eds. I mean, that's what you have now. So what you do is you seek out where those are that you want to be reinforced with. So I don't even think it's some deep nefarious means. Do I think people have agendas and biases? Absolutely. But I think it's much more simple than that. I think they're going after the almighty dollar. And I think that if they can find a platform to get enough opinions to people to get on there, that's how they'll craft their narrative. So they're serving it like a product. We've talked about it on the show many times. News is a product. And they found a channel to deliver that product. And that product is that channel is social media.
And basically what gets the most interaction tends to be fear, anger, hatred, things like that. And so what you're saying is that essentially people love, whether we may claim to hate it, but we gravitate towards fear and anger. And so they're serving that up hot and ready for us in order to get those clicks and likes to monetize their product. Is that what you're saying?
Well, what I'm saying is that I don't necessarily believe that it's some academically orchestrated, nefariously driven means of this subversion of American culture so much as it is. I think people have bosses that want to make money. I think there are people that do have agendas, and I think that they're framing a lot of the narrative of how they're delivering their stories by the journalists, air quotes, the journalists that they hire to do that. But I think that the concept of objective journalism and people that were reporting, but then again, I think we've romanticized the past, that there was this era that this is when all we did was report the news. Well, I disagree. I mean, I think that if you go back to the founding of the country, back to pamphlets being printed as far back as probably the Gutenberg Bible, you'll find ways of people communicating messages. At that time, the struggle was to get the message out to people that could read. Literacy was the access point. Now it's access to a computer or to a handheld multimedia device, commonly your phone. So what I'm saying is that I completely can see, and I think many do, I don't think I'm remotely unique in this, but you know where to go on the dial if you want to get a certain message. Right. When you go to CNN what you're going to get. When you go to Fox what you're going to get. When you go to salon.com. Sorry, I can't even say that with a straight face. When you go to a lot of the websites out there, in both directions, if you take it to the absolute extremity, you're going to find some really cartoonishly invested things. And again, I mean, when you see stories that have, Gawker and BuzzFeed, and I mean, ones that are just legitimately out there, and then people that pick up those stories and try to cleanse them and then rectify them through their platform, and again, we've talked about this as well, fake news. Fake news is not the weather is 75 degrees and sunny. Well, no, it's 77 degrees and it's slightly overcast. It's the crafting of the narrative, to your point, which is, we're just going to edit and clip out what we don't want. They're not reporting on these tremendous treaties and normalization deals. They're just not acknowledging that they're there. It's like a parent that doesn't talk about the other one after a divorce. You know what I mean? It's like one parent is very, what is your father doing this weekend? And then the other parent is like, oh, we don't say mom's name around here. So
who's this strange woman of which you
exactly. Mom became a 4-letter word, not a 3-letter word. Yeah, I mean,
precisely.
And that. So yeah, I mean, do I think there's a sure? Yeah, sure.
Well, let me push back on this for just a second, because I get what you're saying, right? And I do think that is undeniably an aspect of this formula, right? But like all economic functions, right? Economics really, by the way, everyone go read Thomas Sowell's treatise on economics. It's massive. It is probably one of the best books ever written, period, in the story outside of the Bible. What I will say, though, is it helps you really sort of change your mind on how to think about things. And everyone wants one thing to be the thing. And I think your point is very well taken. I think that economics is driving this a lot. The clicks, the trying to create and maintain a engaged audience, I think is absolutely driving a lot of this. But I do want to push back, and I do think that there is far more of a, and again, even beyond the ideological biases that does exist, there's absolutely, I think, a little bit of an absolute broader agenda. Now, just to put, and just as evidence of that, let's talk about, let's face it, the Rona, this little disease you may have heard of.
Is it my corona? Sorry, too soon. Sorry.
It's never too soon. It's been 9 months now. I think we're
right. Soon,
Yeah,
soon was April.
right, exactly. It's the longest April I've ever had. It's let's face it, months in COVID is sort of like dog years, right? So it's like 1 month in COVID time is like 3.5 years. Um, I know I'm 73 suddenly. But anyway, but what I want to do though is take a close look at the actual, like what people believe about it. Most people think it's far more deadly, and I was looking at the actual numbers that came out that have sort of come out that absolutely no one is talking about. For example, the median age is 75, meaning, that is 75 years of age is the median age for people who passed away. Tragically, absolutely. But that's the median age for everyone who's passed. 90% of all deaths, not exclusively from the coronavirus, but just when they say when they keep really wanting to hit, I mean, it's sick the way they keep saying almost 200,000. Like they really want to get there, but 90% of those deaths that we see on a nightly and daily basis now are over 55. 90% below the age of 44. That accounts for 2.7% of the total COVID deaths. And again, even with the COVID deaths, we have to understand that number includes all comorbidities. Only 6% of that number, which is less than 10,000 people, are actually people who have died exclusively of COVID. Now, that doesn't minimize the tragedy of these events. Absolutely not. These are all, every life is precious. But we are talking about broader societal issues. For example, we have things like the flu that kill a lot of people every year. That's just the way these things go. Unfortunately, this is part and parcel of doing business on planet Earth. Now, I think there's, and we've said this many times, there's a middle way here. We don't have to be panicked. We can do things in a logical manner that minimizes the death as far as we can go. But the media doesn't present this information in a way that makes sense. They do it in a way to create an illicit panic. And I don't believe that they don't know that they're doing that. Look at how they structure the nightly news. They say it in such a way that you believe that those 200,000 deaths are just a bunch of young kids running around struck down in their prime, and they're not. The vast majority are unfortunately people who are older, who have other comorbidities. And even that, the aspect of the comorbidity becomes a broader problem, because before COVID ever broke up, I was actually looking into a lot of this stuff for research on a different book, and I noticed they were talking about how many people would die every year from the flu. And on years that we didn't have a flu vaccine, it was way up. But one of the things they mentioned is, the CDC had always stated this: it's almost impossible to know how many people actually die from a disease like a cold or a flu because of comorbidities. The question becomes, well, did the flu actually kill them, or is it all these other comorbidities, and basically it just sort of tilted the factor? So what actually kills them? So these numbers are never 100%. No one has ever believed they were until now. Now we are counting these deaths in this weird, sick way, but they're done in a way to create panic, to create a false sense of fear. And while I would agree with you that a lot of this is due to this desire to really, people want to find out people point to the danger. We want to see where the danger is coming from, and that translates into likes and into shares, which translates into money. Completely agree. But everyone at one time, very early on, started focusing on this story in such a way that it was designed to create, in my opinion, panic. And I don't think that's just because of clicks. I think there was an absolute desire to create panic out of what is a serious situation, but is not the situation that we've been presented.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's just money. So, I mean, I can definitely go with you on that side and say there's a lot of other impacts. It was designed. I'll word it this way: the coverage is designed to drive an action.
Okay,
and that action,
like that. Yeah,
that action can be one of many things: political mobilization, straight economic gain, shifting of cultural ideals, whatever it is. it's designed to drive that. I mean, the oldest saying in the world, and everyone knows this before I say it, is, if it bleeds, it leads. If there's I had a teacher once in film school say, when they worked out of Reuters and the AP, it was like we went to audiences that we knew we could resonate with. So if I knew that there was, some story about a businessman that cut himself shaving in Tokyo over someone where they may have like overthrown a third world party in Zimbabwe, I was going to track the shaving incident because I was going to get a readership out of it, out of Japan, way more than I would over in Africa. And I was like, wow, that's not the level of the story, it's the level of the audience. So you're measuring almost the audience, right? What are we saying, and who are we saying it to, and or actually towards, and so again, I mean, I think back to our topic tonight about how have these massive deals that have brought about, tectonic shifts with regard to foreign policy been undercut. Well, I mean, there is a global pandemic that's going to suck up all the oxygen in the room, and there's an election. So it just, and there's so many stories now. That's the thing with social media being a resource for news, where many people use things like Twitter as their newsfeed, or they use Facebook, or they use XYZ factors, right? At the end of the day, I think what we see is that if you keep a lid on the good stuff, it's just, let's get back to our news of everything's bad. You don't have, I mean, it was Harvard that originally released, or one of the original releases of the early releases of a trend that they noticed the amount of negative coverage for the Trump administration. Harvard is overwhelmingly, we'll say, focused its lens and perspective in one direction. And even Harvard was like, this is out of control. Like, this is at a level that's never been seen. It's just unbelievable. And that's why I'm saying that it's these channels that are designed for whatever action they're driving. I mean, again, we're now at a point where we have peace in them, not just peace throughout, but I mean, like there are the domino effect, if you will, the reverse of the fall, of the Iron Curtain, if you will. This is, the domino effect of potentially liberation and freedom, and just normalization of trade, increasing some certain things, soft power, diplomacy, whatever you want to call it. But the point of the matter is, it's when the Speaker of the House refers to it as a distraction.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe if there were another president in there belonging to a different party, it would be the grandest gesture in the history of the universe. And it would be like, this is a biblical level event.
Yeah.
So they cannot. And that is the strategy. Even when you're good, you're bad. Because to acknowledge your good is to be bad.
Right. So let me start with, I completely agree with you, but can I throw one little quick, maybe, thought in here? And I think this really is going to sum up the broader question that I've had percolating on tonight's conversation. And that is, while I agree with everything you just said, I do want to ask this one question. And you mentioned, I think you made a very good point about how if this had been another president from another political party, this would be the greatest thing ever in a biblical proportioned event. I would agree with you, but I would also suggest if it wasn't Donald Trump doing this, that even if they were still a Republican doing it, it would be far more favorably received. The fact that it's Donald Trump that's doing it seems to be the problem, and everyone stated that. I don't think that's not a new opinion, but here's the wrinkle. I don't think anyone but Donald Trump could have necessarily done this. And this is where my question goes, right? Is it possible Trump comes in, the economy blows up by doing very simple fixes that economists have talked about for decades? He's able to bring many of these these oppositional forces that are just stuck in their intransigence for decades. We literally ended a 60-year war with North Korea. All of these things happen under Donald Trump. Is it that Donald Trump is the greatest, most brilliant human who's ever existed on the face of the earth? Or, and I think this is really my thing, is it entirely possible that the people who have come before had a mentality that actually prevented peace from being established, that actually prevented our economy from really taking off the way it could. And at which point the question becomes, is if that's the case, if it is this mentality, this sort of within the beltway thinking, is it just that it's simply the mindset of bureaucracy and that's the poison? Or was it a deliberate attempt? Is the opposition that Trump faces a broader opposition to sort of what we've talked about since day one, this sort of military industrial complex, this deep state mentality? Has that been essentially sabotaging our entire worldview on the political scene, for be it either overseas or internal politics?
So I appreciate your thought on that and your perspective of considering on that kind of deep level. I think I have a different opinion. I don't mean it dismissively. I don't mean it in any type of, irreverent way or anything like that. But I would say it like this. I kind of look at a lot of politicians, again, not representatives for our country, but politicians. I think there's a difference.
I would agree with that.
I think there's a difference between a musician and a rock star.
Yes.
I think Yo-Yo Ma is a musician. I think the Butthole Surfers were a band of rock stars. But the point that I'm getting at, and for our fans out there, that is actually a band. They opened for Pearl Jam in 1993. But the point that I'm getting at is,
before we go too far, I do have to say this though: the lead singer of that group is Mr. Peppermint's son. That's not. I'm not kidding. That's a true fact. The lead singer of the Butthole Surfers was Mr. Peppermint's son. Do you know who Mr. Mr. Peppermint was?
I have no response. Just the thing. I feel like the little Roadrunner when he like Wile E. Coyote when he holds up signs, and just like exclamation points or something. I have nothing. No, but
yeah, you brought them up. I must. Oh wait, do you want to go one more step into the crazy zone? He's a huge fan of Rush Limbaugh.
Okay. Again, I have nothing. Now I'm just holding up two signs with exclamation points, except one side is exclamation point and the other side is just ellipses, because it's like that's it, it's over. No, what I was gonna say was, so what I'm getting at is the difference between that of being a politician vice that of being a civil servant working on behalf as a representative of the United States. And I would say, I think that they are kind of the kids in junior high that learned where the cool table was, and now they do that for a job.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that it's about them doing anything other than trying to score points and win, when there are a lot of people in Washington that I want to believe are working behind the scenes that you're never going to know about, that are doing their job, that have fought to be there, that are working compelled to serve this country and the ideals with which it was founded upon. But I will say, because of that, without it sounding just brutally cynical, my real concern is that I don't think they actually believe a lot of the things that they're supposedly standing behind. I just don't. I saw a comment that Trey Gowdy made, and I've always liked Trey Gowdy. He's a very interesting guy, intelligent guy. And he was talking about, he was like, well, let's see. We finally got a condemnation from the sitting Speaker of the House with regard to riots. It only took $2 billion worth of damage, 700 police officers injured, and 16 people killed, or whatever the specifics on those numbers are. Don't quote me to that. But it was like, wow, because again, it's about a narrative, and the narrative is about scoring points, and scoring points is about winning. And that's what it is. I mean, the fact that they've held up the coronavirus relief is just unimaginable. And there are Democrats coming out saying, this is absurd. I was never so proud in my whole life as to see that. Like, wow, there are people that are like, this is stupid. We need to help people. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was fantastic. I've said to any one of the people listening tonight and any one of our friends, I want more than anything, like we've said, good speech defeats bad speech. Good ideas defeats bad ideas, and more speech, more intelligent speech over restricted speech. But what I'm getting at is, I'd love to see a marketplace where two people come together and regardless of party, they're both fighting over the better idea, because then everybody wins. I've always made the example of, what if we locked them all in a room and one side was like, well, we just want to make everything cost effective. And the other side is like, well, we want to cover everybody. Like, clearly you can tell which side is looking at which, right? But then you stop and you say, my goodness, what could we do if we really put our heads together?
Yeah. What would if we actually thought about this.
Well, actually, the word governed. What if we govern?
Yeah.
And that's why I think that it's so funny that for so many people that are saying we need to take the power away, or that so many people that are so anti-government, and I'm thinking whether it's local, state, civic, federal, whatever, and yet somehow the irony is that their solution to that is to give more power to the government. Let's cut back on things enshrined in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights because we don't trust government. I don't understand that logic, but I don't want to veer too far from the original question tonight, was how come these things are being overshot? I think it's a direct call to action. It's a struggle. It's a tactic. It's a tool. It's a considered operation, if you will. I mean, that makes it sound all covert. I think driving towards the almighty dollar to mask onto, as if I had to put a theme together, I would say, in an attempt, we'll call it power or action, and money can fuel that. We'll leave it at that. I think whether it's political, social, religious, financial, there's a drive for a response, for an action. And the danger to that is when you discuss big level topics, which we're not discussing. Saw an article earlier and it said we've gone from and it blamed poor millennials. I always want to defend my millennials out there because a lot of them were my students, but it says, the millennial generation has taken us from low information to no information. To challenge things that you don't like is now, it's not even to be combated. It's just to let it evaporate, just to take it out of the marketplace, cancel culture and whatnot. I don't like what you're saying, so I'm just going to take it away. But I think in an attempt to drive an action, they're seeking channels to do that through accumulation of wealth and power, and they accomplish that by driving a narrative. And some of the tactics of driving that narrative involve ignoring entire other plot lines because they're actively pursuing a channel of trying to be the cool kid. And by doing that, they do it by crafting the narrative and using those types of tactics. You can never get a win, because if it is, everything that they've so heavily entrenched themselves, they believe that to go against it even remotely is sacrilege.
And this is why you can even see, if I'm hearing you right, this is why politicians will often, they'll just be as wishy-washy as the day is long, and they will happily change every position they've ever had in order to comply with whoever the cool kid is. And these cool kids are the ones that are driving the idea, and they have this belief that that's just, they've made a choice and that's what they want to believe, and they can't hear anything else. And so it's the power of their own drive it makes them the event and the thing of the moment. The politicians, because they want to say the cool kids, they're just going to whatever the issue du jour is and trying to stay at the table, while the actual issues of doing real politics, which means actually working to solve problems, requires things like wisdom, patience, understanding, willingness to make beneficial compromises, understanding what's right and wrong. Those things aren't necessarily things that politicians are able to get elected doing, so they have no real skill in them. Their only skill is basically staying at the table.
Well, I'm going to credit Kinky Friedman. I did not say this, but I thought it was incredibly funny that he did, and it was an interesting commentary. He said, just remember, I've never had any, I think he was talking about, kind of running as an out there candidate, different than the rest. You saw this Jewish cowboy coming along with his cowboy hat and talking about all these subject material and wanting to have these conversations. And at the end, he said, nope, just remember, politics, just define the word. Poly meaning many, tick meaning blood-sucking parasite. And I thought, yep. Wow, I don't look at human beings that way. There's no denigration on a person, but I'm simply saying that concept. Ask people when you walk down the street and say, do you have any desire to be a politician? And then ask them, do you have any desire to serve? And I think one answer will get that. But unfortunately, I think in their mind, they'll separate a lot of those two. One doesn't have anything to do with the other. And that's truly the most tragic part. My friends know, I've had conversations with many of them, that I would have aspirations to serve if I felt that was a channel that I could best affect. And maybe I could. Maybe I could hopefully continue to find ways for all of us to help, serve our country and do what we can do. But I don't know if you've got the bankroll for it. I don't know if you've got the exposing people to things like getting doxxed. I mean, look what happens when you run now. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
is it true you sneezed twice in the 7th grade? Well, we're going to need to see documentation about that. It's like,
right. No, it's insane. Well, I think that isn't this so. Let me
and
pose
then
this
the next
way.
thing you know, you're part of a Chew Gate because you didn't
Exactly, because
bring about something.
right, it's like, did you seize into your elbow or did you seize into your hand? Did you wash your hand? Did you use the appropriate? Yeah, it's everything. So then, let me ask this, and we can end on this question: is it possible that, as I mentioned earlier, when you look at the totality of any phenomena of any movement, there's always slices of the pie, right? Is it possible that this pie has so many slices that it's easy to sort of get lost in which one's which, and which one maybe promotes the other or even feeds the other? And that definitely one slice is economics, like you said, this desire for money to get likes and etc. Popularity, which absolutely ties into this, the idea that politicians, the media, they don't really care. They don't really even have an agenda or an ideology. They're just trying to maintain power, to maintain money and wealth and status through popularity. That their real skills is in, winning the popularity contest at a table when they were in junior high versus actually governing and solving issues. Is it also possible that maybe there's another factor in here, though, that there are, that some people are ideologically driven, and those people are playing a role in this? That since we no longer really have a culture that values truth or objective reality, that they are simply ideologically driven, and that and if it doesn't comply with their ideology, it must go.
I think excuse me. I think it's both. I had a conversation with some mentors, and that we were discussing, actually, of all things, Few Good Men, and we were talking about the scene, of course, where Tom Cruise's character Daniel Kaffee is cross-examining Colonel Nathan Jessup, played by Jack Nicholson, and it's the very famous scene that everyone knows. And what he's trying to do is lay the foundation of, would you say your orders are disobeyed? And he's like, disobeyed? Are you kidding? Like, or what's wrong with you? And then he builds and he builds and he builds, and he goes, no, you said they're never disobeyed. So how could they misinterpret it? Why did they take it amongst themselves? You said they never do it. And it was this back and forth. And the reason we had this conversation was because what we were discussing was intent versus application. Were the orders carried out in a way that they were intended? Was the result something different than what was intended? Even though you might think you're carrying it out. So what I would say is that the answer is, what we really look for is a lead somewhere in between. When you're younger, you're so objective that Tom Cruise is the protagonist and Jack Nicholson's character is the antagonist, and you realize that what you probably need overall is someone right in the middle that possesses both sides and knows how to navigate and kind of work through that landscape. I bring it to your point about the ideology and people where they are. I think that, and without trying to make this sound like some political slam, I'm just trying to use a clear example. I think we're seeing a change in that right now. I think Joe Biden has demonstrated 50 years in Washington on how to survive without really having to have opinions that you're not willing to change, because he can change them so frequently. He's changed them in his own campaign multiple times. That's not any political bash. It's factually based off of comments that he's made. I would say what's starting to be replaced is that politicians going and having that realm of being able to at least present it as they're there to represent others are now being replaced by absolute ideologues that are coming to say, this is what I believe, and if you send me, I'm going to do this. And that is much more along the lines of someone like AOC. So I think the shift that we're seeing is not only from one who has that ability to survive and I'll be here for 50 years and it's to do this, but I also want to believe somewhere in there that there's the intention to serve your constituency, which is what you're there for. But now that opinion is, and that operation is almost changing. It's like, this is what I am about. This is what I'm going to pursue. If you vote for me, that's what you're endorsing. Right. And to me, that seems backwards of a representative government, even though the first one doesn't optimize that, because again, you end up working out with special interests because you just want to survive. But what I want to do is, and I know we've got a quickie this week, so we're going to wrap it up here, but I liked your representation, your question before about, how do we end the show each episode with kind of a call to action, or at least a call to mindfulness, or some type of proposed solution? So I'm going to kick it back to you in a way that we're going to put a bow on this episode. And again, I want to take this time to sign off and to thank our fans so much for your support in this changing platform as we discover how how we're moving around here, and bringing you the programming that we want to bring, that we believe in, and raising hopefully the level of dialogue, if nothing more than just within our friend group. We're looking to be in an environment that we want to contribute and help put some hustle, into the muscle to help make things better for everybody. So I'm going to kick it back to you, Alex, and say, with thanks to all of our listeners tonight, and maybe questions that they may have on this, how do we right the ship on this?
Well, you know what? Actually, I think that's a great question, because I may have played my hand a little bit by even naming this episode what I did. Is it malevolence, or is it just that, are people mistaken? I think it's both. I think that's the problem. I think, and to your point, as ideologues have started coming in, like AOC, I think at the same time, though, we are seeing, and I think Donald Trump is probably just the broadest example, but I think we have a lot of little examples of what needs to happen and what is actually happening as well. I think this is a great time. As the ideologues are coming in, we also have people who are genuinely coming in to serve. We have the Dan Crenshaws, we have the Trey Gowdies, we have these people who are Shelley Luthers, right? They're literally coming in from outside of the political world saying, okay, we can't do this anymore. This doesn't work. We are literally dying. We need to step up. My call, I think the way we fix this is that every person listening to this, you go and you find out every person that you can vote for, school board, dog catcher, I don't care. You have to be engaged. Now, this is a difficult thing. Don't get me wrong. It is absolutely difficult. But you get out there, you find out who these people are, you find out what they stand for, and then you hold them accountable. It would gone have to be the days. Let me phrase this. If we don't change this, we're going to absolutely lose this country. It can never, ever be that we just vote somebody in and walk away. These are politicians, no matter how good they are, how well-meaning they are, how brilliant they are, or even how dumb they are. It doesn't matter. If no politician is vote and walk away. You have to keep them honest. You have to keep them focused on the prize. You have to call them into account. And when they step over the line, you have to be willing to vote them out, or at least call them out very publicly. We can no longer look to leaders. We have to be the power. These people need to be servants serving us. And we do that by actually participating. If you're just, when you look at the world around you and you're upset at the way things are going, please understand, do you know the name of every councilman? Do you know the name of the mayor and of whatever structure you may be in, right? There's not every town is set up the same way. Not every city is set up the same way. Unless you can name every person, unless you know who they are by sight, unless you've been paying attention to what they've been doing, you don't actually have, then the problem ultimately is you. It's all of us. We thought we'd just vote these people in. We hit D, we hit R, and we didn't care. We just thought they'd take care of everything. They don't. We got to pick up the mantle. We got to do the hard work. And if we do, I think we save this country and turn it into what it was supposed to be. A place of peace and prosperity for everyone, regardless of where you come from, and regardless of what your skin color is, regardless of your religion or lack thereof.
Well, and I think we have to be members of a knowledgeable citizenry to do that. And that falls on us to be those citizens that are aware, that are mindful.
Yep. It's a choice we have to make.
True. I want to fire a quote at you, and then you'll do our send-off as we figure it out, folks. Here, you're peeking behind the curtain on the workings of the show and the new platform and our new time frame, new time slot. Alex, I like this one. I'm a fan of Mark Twain. I think he puts a nice zing to a lot of things. And this one is something that I think ties into tonight. And it says, patriotism is supporting your country all the time and your government when it deserves it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Nick, thank you for this episode and all the hard work you put into it. Guys, thank you for listening. Like, follow, and subscribe. We are hopefully going to set up a Facebook page as well, so if we have any written thoughts or ideas, we'll put them out for you there as well. Thank you for coming on this first episode. Again, inflict us upon all of your friends and enemies alike. And
this is your fault, guys.
Yeah, this is your fault. So, but you know what? Be here, same time, same Not Playing Politics channel, and we'll talk about whatever else happens to be bouncing around next week. Nick, we'll see you then.
Take care, brother.